Please, that man is not our dad. Jack Colton heard those 5 words and his coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. 2 little girls, soaking wet, shaking, gripping his sleeve like he was the only solid thing left in the world. He didn't know them. He had never seen them before in his life. But the man walking through the cafe door behind them, the one scanning the room with the practiced calm of someone who hurt people for a living, Jack knew that type. He had been that type. And right now, 2 children were begging him to be something different. If this story already has you hooked, hit that subscribe button and follow along until the very end. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain had been falling since noon. Jack didn't mind rain. He had grown up in a city that treated rain like a personal insult. People hunching their shoulders, cursing under their breath, acting like the sky owed them something. He had never seen it that way. Rain was honest. It didn't pretend to be anything other than what it was. He came to the same cafe every Thursday. Booth by the window, second from the back. Coffee black, no sugar. He never ordered food. The woman behind the counter, a stout woman named Pauline, who wore her silver hair in a braid and had worked there since before Jack could remember, always brought it to him without being asked. She never attempted conversation beyond, "Cold one today?" or "Looks like it's letting up," and Jack respected her deeply for it. He had been sitting there for 20 minutes, watching the rain bend the reflections of the streetlights into long, trembling ribbons on the pavement. His phone was face down on the table. His men knew not to call on Thursdays unless something was on fire, literally or figuratively. This hour was his, one of the very few things in his life that belonged only to him. He was lifting the cup to take his second sip when the door crashed open. Not the careful push of someone stepping in from the rain. A crash, the kind that comes from small bodies moving too fast, from desperation overriding any sense of caution. Jack's hand moved before his brain caught up, reaching beneath his jacket to the grip of the weapon holstered against his ribs. Old reflex, the kind that didn't ask permission. But what came through the door wasn't a threat. 2 little girls, identical in every way. Same dark hair plastered flat against their foreheads, same wide brown eyes, same pale blue raincoats now soaked through to nothing. They couldn't have been older than 8, maybe 9. They were breathing hard, the kind of breathing that comes after running for a long time, and their eyes swept the cafe the way frightened animals sweep a room. Fast, frantic, looking for the one thing that might save them. Their eyes landed on Jack. He had no idea why. There were 12 other people in that cafe, a young couple by the door, a group of older men in the middle playing cards, a woman alone with a laptop near the counter. Any of them would have been a more sensible choice. Any of them looked more approachable than a man in a dark suit sitting alone with an expression that had, on more than one occasion, made grown men find reasons to be somewhere else. But the girls ran straight to him. The one on the left reached him first. She grabbed his sleeve with both hands, small fingers, cold and damp, and pulled herself up onto the edge of the booth seat, leaning in so close he could feel her breath against his cheek. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper, low and urgent and absolutely certain. "Please, that man is not our dad." Jack didn't move, didn't breathe. The words landed somewhere deep and still inside him, the way a stone lands in water. Quiet impact, then ripples spreading out in every direction. He turned his head slowly and looked at the door. The man came in 30 seconds later. He was tall, somewhere in his mid-40s, wearing a gray coat that had been expensive once. His hair was combed back with the kind of precision that suggested he was particular about his appearance, particular about control. He moved through the door with his hands at his sides and his eyes already working the room. Not curious, not searching the way someone looks for a lost child. Methodical, sectioning, the way someone looks when they're trying to confirm a target location before deciding how to proceed. Jack had seen that look in the mirror for 20 years. The man's eyes found the girl's. Something passed across his face that wasn't relief, wasn't love, wasn't even the basic human reaction of a father who has been frightened for his children. It was satisfaction, possession, the look of a man who had misplaced something valuable and was now watching someone hand it back. Jack set his coffee cup down on the saucer with a small, deliberate click. The girl on his left, still gripping his sleeve, felt him move and tightened her hold. The second twin had pressed herself into the booth beside him, wedged against his arm, small and trembling and absolutely silent. Not crying. That was the detail that got him. They weren't crying. Children that age, in that state of fear, should have been in tears. The fact that they weren't, the fact that they had clearly learned somewhere along the way that crying didn't help, told Jack everything he needed to know about what their life had been like. "Okay," he said quietly, just that one word, directed down at the girl clutching his sleeve. He said it the way he said things when he meant them completely. "Okay." She looked up at him. And Jack Colton, a man who had ordered men hurt, who had built an empire on fear and silence, and the willingness to do what others wouldn't, looked into the eyes of a child who had run through the rain to a stranger and decided to trust him, and felt something tighten in his chest that he hadn't felt in a very long time. He looked back up at the man in the gray coat. The man had covered half the cafe's floor in the time it took for that exchange. He was moving with calm, unhurried steps, no urgency, no panic, and the message in that was clear. He wasn't afraid of anyone here. He didn't think he needed to be. Emma, his voice was smooth, practiced, the kind of voice that had learned to be warm as a tool, not a feeling. "There you are, sweetheart. Dad's been looking all over." The girl beside Jack, the one who hadn't spoken yet, made a sound. Small and involuntary. Not a cry, not a word. Something halfway between the two, like a sound that started as one thing and got swallowed before it could become another. Jack's jaw tightened. He did not stand up. He did not reach for the weapon beneath his jacket. He sat very still, in the way that certain animals go still just before they move, and he looked at the man with an expression that held no heat at all, which was, for anyone who knew Jack Colton, far more dangerous than anger. "Your daughters?" he said. "Yes." The man stopped at the edge of the table, looking down at both girls with that same expression, possession dressed up as concern. "They get frightened sometimes and they run. It's something we're working on." His eyes cut briefly to Jack, acknowledging him for the first time. "Thank you for keeping them company. We'll get out of your way." He reached out a hand toward the girl on Jack's left. She pressed herself harder against Jack's arm. The man's smile didn't change. That was the tell. A real father, rebuffed by his own child in a moment of obvious distress, would have reacted, hurt, confused, worried, something. The smile staying exactly in place, unaltered, like a mask bolted down. That told Jack this man had rehearsed this moment, had run this play before. "She seems like she doesn't want to go," Jack said. "Children often don't want to do what's good for them." The man's voice had picked up the faintest edge now, still smooth, still measured, but underneath, something impatient, something that was used to getting its way. "That's true," Jack agreed pleasantly. "Mine never did either." A beat of silence. The man looked at him differently now, recalculating. "You have children?" "I did." Jack picked up his coffee cup and took a slow sip. "They didn't run from me, though." The room had gone quiet around them in that particular way that rooms go quiet when people sense something happening without being able to name what it is. The card players had slowed. The young couple by the door wasn't talking anymore. Pauline behind the counter had stopped moving. The man in the gray coat stood very still for a moment. Then he pulled his hand back. "I think there's been some confusion," he said. His voice had recalibrated again, smoother now, almost apologetic, the performance shifting gears. "The girls have been through a difficult time recently. Their mother passed away 6 months ago. They sometimes run from me because they associate me with that grief. He paused, let that sit. It's been hard on all of us. Jack said nothing. The girl on his left made a sound that was almost a word. He felt her fingers tighten on his sleeve. I'm sorry to have disturbed your evening, the man continued. If you'll just... Sit down, Jack said. The two words came out without force, without volume. They weren't a request, and they weren't quite a command. They were simply a fact, delivered with the calm certainty of someone who was accustomed to being obeyed because the alternative was worse. The man blinked. I'm sorry? Sit down. Jack nodded toward the seat across from him. We're going to talk for a minute. Something passed behind the man's eyes. A flash of cold assessment, a rapid calculation. He was deciding, measuring Jack against whatever timeline, whatever plan he'd walked in here with, measuring the risk of making a scene versus the risk of something he couldn't quite name yet. He sat down. The moment he did, the girl on Jack's left, the one who had spoken to him first, the one who had grabbed his sleeve in the rain, exhaled a breath so long and shaking, it sounded like she'd been holding it since she left wherever she'd come from. Her grip on his sleeve didn't loosen, but something in her posture changed, just slightly. Like a wire that had been pulled tight enough to snap had been given the smallest amount of slack. What's your name? Jack asked the man. Victor. No hesitation, which meant either it was true or it was a name he'd been using long enough to own it. Victor, Jack nodded slowly. And you're saying these are your daughters? I am. Then you won't mind answering a few questions. It wasn't a question. Like where they've been tonight, and why they're soaking wet, and why... Jack paused, and for just a moment let his eyes drop to something the man couldn't see, but could certainly guess at. They ran 2 blocks through the rain and the dark to grab the sleeve of a stranger. Victor's jaw moved, just slightly. Children. Don't do that, Jack said quietly. I've talked to enough liars in my life to know when someone's about to use a general truth to dodge a specific question. Don't do that. Answer the question. The silence between them stretched. And in that silence, something happened that Jack had not expected. The girl on his left, the one who'd whispered to him, the one he'd been thinking of as Emily because that was the first name the man had said, lifted her head from where she'd pressed it against his arm and looked directly at the man across the table. And she said, in a voice that was small but completely, terrifyingly steady, "You told us if we ran, you'd hurt our mom." The words landed like something physical. Victor's expression didn't move. That was the most damning thing. It didn't move at all. No flinch, no denial, no outrage, nothing. Just that same controlled stillness, recalculating, recalibrating, deciding which version of reality to offer next. Jack set his coffee cup down. He looked at Victor for a long moment. Then he looked down at the girl. "Is your mother alive?" he asked her. She held his gaze. 8 years old, brown eyes that had seen too much. "He took her somewhere," she said. 3 days ago. He said if we were good and didn't tell anybody, he'd take us to her." Emily. Victor's voice had dropped. It wasn't warm anymore. "Her name's Emma," the second twin said. Her first word since the café. Quiet, fierce, correcting the man who claimed to be her father without hesitation. "I'm Emily." Victor looked at her, and Jack watched him look at her. And what he saw in that look, the flash of contempt, the micro-expression of someone recalculating not a relationship but a problem, settled in Jack's chest like cold iron. He understood now, completely, with the clarity of a man who had spent his adult life operating in shadows and knew exactly what the dark looked like. He understood what was sitting across this table from him. This was not a confused father, not even a cruel one. This was someone who had acquired these children the same way someone acquires any commodity, not through love or blood, but through leverage. Their father owed someone something, and when that debt came due, Victor had come to collect the interest. "Okay," Jack said. He said it the same way he'd said it to Emma 30 minutes ago, low and even and meaning something absolute. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, slowly, deliberately, making no sudden movement, and pulled out his phone. He set it on the table face up. He looked at Victor. "I'm going to make a phone call," he said. "While I do that, you're going to stay right where you are, and I want to be very clear about something before I dial." His voice didn't change. It stayed exactly the same, calm, almost pleasant, like a man discussing weather. "If you reach into that coat for whatever's in the left inside pocket, yes, I noticed. Pauline behind the counter is going to hear a sound she's never going to forget. And that'll be the end of your Thursday." He paused. "Are we clear?" Victor said nothing. "I'll take that as a yes." Jack pressed a single contact and raised the phone to his ear. 2 rings. A voice on the other end, instantly alert. "Boss." "Danny." Jack's eyes stayed on Victor's face. "I need you and Marcus at the coffee place on Heron Street. Bring the car. Give me 20 minutes. We're 20 away. Then make it 15. He ended the call and put the phone back in his pocket, picked up his coffee, took a sip. Victor's eyes had changed now. The smooth performance was still there, still technically intact, but beneath it something had shifted. The recalculation had reached its conclusion, and the conclusion was that this situation had moved outside the parameters of what he'd planned for. "You're making a mistake," Victor said. "I make a lot of mistakes." Jack glanced briefly at the twins, then back. "But usually I know which ones they are before I make them. This isn't one of them." "You don't know who I work for." "I have a general idea." Jack's expression didn't change. "And I'm going to be honest with you, Victor. The name you're about to drop, it's not going to do what you think it's going to do. Because whoever you work for, they work for someone. And that someone..." He stopped. Let the silence carry the rest of it. Victor studied him. "Jack Colton," he said, quietly, like he was confirming something he'd suspected. "There it is," Jack said. A long silence. The card players in the middle of the room had gone back to their game. The couple by the door had left. Pauline had disappeared into the kitchen. The café had contracted around the 3 of them. Jack, the man across the table, and 2 small girls pressed against Jack's side, listening to adults talk about things that were too large for children to be inside of. Emma, the one who'd first grabbed his sleeve, had not let go. He had not asked her to. Victor leaned back in his seat. His posture shifted, the tension in his shoulders rearranging itself into something that was trying to look like deliberate calm. "So what now?" he said. "You call the cops? Because I promise you that's a road neither of us wants to go down." "I'm not calling the cops," Jack said. "Then what?" "Right now?" Jack set his cup down. "Right now you're going to stay in that seat until my people get here. And then you're going to tell me exactly where these girls' mother is. And then..." He paused. Let the beat land. "We'll figure out the rest from there." "And if I don't?" Jack looked at him. Just looked at him. For a long, quiet moment that was entirely without threat, entirely without heat. Just a direct, unblinking look from a man who had been in rooms far darker than this one and had walked out of all of them. Victor looked away first. The rain kept falling outside the window. The streetlights bent their reflections on the wet pavement. The coffee in Jack's cup had gone cold, but he didn't call Pauline for a fresh one. He sat where he was, one 8-year-old girl pressed against each side of him, and he waited for his men to arrive, and he did not think about what happened next. He only thought about right now, about this moment, about the small, fierce weight of trust leaning against his arm. He had not asked for any of this. He had come here for coffee and silence and an hour that belonged to him. But somewhere in the last 40 minutes, something had shifted in the architecture of this Thursday, and he understood, with the quiet certainty of someone who had lived long enough to know when a door was opening versus when a door was closing, that the next few hours were going to cost him something. He just hadn't decided yet whether the cost was one he was willing to pay. Emma's fingers, still wrapped around his sleeve, answered that question before he could finish asking it. He had been willing from the moment she ran through the rain. He just hadn't admitted it yet. Danny arrived in 14 minutes. Jack heard the car before he saw it. The low, unhurried pull of an engine that knew it didn't need to hurry because the people inside it were the kind of people that situations waited for. He didn't turn toward the window. He kept his eyes on Victor, who had spent the last 12 minutes doing a very controlled impression of a man who wasn't calculating his exits. Victor was good at it. Jack had to give him that. But good wasn't the same as good enough. Emma had finally loosened her grip on his sleeve. Not let go, just loosened, the way someone eases a fist after the first wave of panic passes and settles into something harder and quieter underneath. Emily, on his right, hadn't moved at all. She was sitting completely still in the way that certain children learn to sit still. Not from patience, but from practice. From learning that stillness is sometimes the only power available to you. That particular stillness had been burning a hole in Jack's chest since the moment he noticed it. "Your people are here," Victor said. He'd heard the car too. "They are. And what exactly do you think this accomplishes?" Victor's voice had recalibrated again. Smoother now, almost reasonable. The tone of a man attempting to reframe the situation as a mutual problem requiring a mutual solution. "You pull me out of here, hold me somewhere, ask me questions. That triggers a response from people above my pay grade. People you don't want responding." "You keep saying that," Jack said, "like I'm supposed to get nervous." "I'm saying it because it's true. Most things people use to threaten me are true." Jack picked up his cup, remembered it was cold, set it back down. "That's never been the part that mattered." The door opened. Finally came in first, mid-30s, broad across the shoulders, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned to make himself take up less space than he actually did. Marcus came in behind him, taller, slower in the way that very capable people are sometimes slow because they don't feel the need to rush. They read the room in under 3 seconds, clocked Victor, clocked the girls, and both of their expressions did the same thing. A flicker of something that wasn't quite surprise, wasn't quite concern, but was something in between that men in their line of work rarely let themselves feel. Danny looked at Jack. "Boss." "Sit with our friend here for a minute." Jack said it easily, like he was asking Danny to pass the salt. Victor looked at Danny, looked at Marcus, looked back at Jack. "This is a mistake." "You said that already." Jack was already sliding out of the booth. He paused, looked down at the two girls. "I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere." Emma looked up at him. "You're coming back?" The question hit him somewhere unguarded. Not the words themselves, the way she asked it. Flat, matter of fact, the question of a child who had learned not to assume that adults who walked away came back. "Yeah," he said. "I'm coming back." He moved to the far end of the counter, away from the booth, and pulled out his phone. He had 3 calls to make and maybe 6 minutes before Victor's patience finished running its calculations and decided on a different strategy. He started with the one that mattered most. 2 rings. "This is Reeves. Detective Carl Reeves. 15 years on the force, the last 8 working organized crime." Jack had a relationship with Reeves that neither of them was entirely comfortable describing. Not friendship, not informant and handler, something that existed in the space between useful and complicated, and had so far managed to stay out of the way of both their careers. "I need something from you," Jack said. "Of course you do." The sound of a chair adjusting. "It's almost 9 o'clock. Missing woman. Name's probably Carver or something close to it. I'll have more in a few minutes. She's been gone 3 days. 2 daughters are sitting 20 feet from me right now. And the man who took her is sitting across from them, currently reconsidering his life choices." A pause. "You have the man who took her." "In a booth, having coffee, metaphorically speaking." "Jack, I'm not asking you to move yet. I'm asking you to be ready to move. There's a network behind this, Reeves. This isn't one man with a grudge. The girls used the word warehouse, and the way they said it, they've been there. They know what it looks like from the inside. Another pause, longer this time. How old are the girls? 8, maybe 9. The pause after that one was the longest. All right, Reeves said finally. I'm ready when you give me something to work with. Give me an hour. He hung up and went back to the booth. Victor was sitting with his hands flat on the table. Danny had made a quiet suggestion at some point in the last 90 seconds, the geometry of the situation having communicated it more efficiently than words. Marcus was at the end of the booth, not sitting, just present, in the way that Marcus was always present, like a fact of the environment that you couldn't unnotice once you'd noticed it. Jack slid back into the seat beside Emma. She had not moved. Okay, he said, and this time he said it to both girls, looking from one to the other. I need you to tell me some things. Can you do that? Emily nodded. Emma just watched him. Your mom's name? Sarah, Emily said. Sarah Carver. Your dad, your real dad, where is he? The girls exchanged a look, the particular look of twins who have an entire conversation in the space of a glance, who have been each other's primary translators for the whole of their short lives. Emma answered, He left 8 months ago. He owed money to people and he said he had to go fix it and he'd come back. Her voice was careful, measured, like she was reciting something she'd rehearsed, something she'd gone over so many times it had worn smooth. He didn't come back. And Victor, when did he show up? 6 months ago. Emily this time. He said our dad sent him. He said our dad was in trouble and we needed to go with him so he could protect us. She stopped. Mom didn't believe him. She said we weren't going anywhere. And then, she stopped again. And then he started coming around anyway, Emma finished, all the time. And then last week he said if we didn't do what he said, he'd... She stopped short of finishing it. He'd hurt her, Jack said. Neither girl confirmed it, neither denied it. The silence was its own answer. Jack looked across the table at Victor. Victor was looking back at him with an expression that had finally dropped most of its performance. What was underneath wasn't fear. Jack had expected fear and found something more interesting. Calculation mixed with a thread of genuine curiosity, like a man who had spent his career being underestimated and was in the process of determining whether this was one of those situations. The mother, Jack said, where is she? I'm not sure what you're... Victor. Jack's voice didn't change. It stayed exactly level. I want to be very clear with you about something. I have been in rooms with men much scarier than you. I have had conversations much more unpleasant than this one. And I have a very, very low tolerance for people wasting my time when there are children sitting next to me. He paused. So I'm going to ask you one more time. Where is she? Victor looked at the girls. Something moved in his face, not guilt, nothing that clean, but something adjacent to it. The ghost of a recognition that this had gotten heavier than intended. The Dellon facility, he said quietly, off Route 9, past the old rail yard. Storage and processing. Processing, Jack repeated. Victor said nothing. The words sat between them like something with teeth. Jack felt Emma go completely still against his arm. He didn't look down at her. He kept his eyes on Victor because he needed to keep his face very controlled right now. And looking at an 8-year-old girl who had just heard the word processing applied to a facility where her mother was being held was not going to help him keep his face controlled. How many men? Jack asked. I'm not. How many men at the facility? A beat. 8 on the night rotation, 12 during the day. Cameras. Exterior perimeter, interior on the main floor. Women being held. Victor's jaw moved. Several. The word hit the table like a flat stone. Several. Jack absorbed it, filed it, kept his expression exactly where it was. And the man running it. His name is Gregor Voss. Victor's voice had gone almost professional now. Stripped of performance, just information. the voice of someone who had decided that cooperation was the more strategic choice. He moves every few weeks. He's at the Dellen location now, but not for much longer. How much longer? 2 days, maybe 3. After that, the women get moved and the location goes dark. Jack looked at him for a long moment. Why are you telling me this? Victor held his gaze. Because the man you are, I know what you do to people who touch children, and I'd rather be useful to you than be the alternative. It was the most honest thing Victor had said since he walked through the door. Jack stood up. He looked at Danny. Take him somewhere comfortable and keep him that way. He glanced at Marcus. Stay close. What about? Danny nodded toward the girls. They're with me. He held out his hand to Emma. She looked at it for a moment, not suspicious, just looking, the way someone looks at a thing they want very much and aren't entirely sure they're allowed to want. Then she took it. Emily was already sliding out of the booth before he could offer his hand to her. Independent. That one was going to be something, Jack thought. That one was going to be something remarkable. If the world could just manage to leave her alone long enough to get there. He took them to his car, not the back seat, the front, both of them squeezed into the passenger side, Emma closer to the door, Emily between her and Jack. Everyone slightly overlapping in a way that shouldn't have been comfortable, but somehow was. He turned the heat up without being asked. Neither girl commented on it, but he felt Emily's shoulders drop about a quarter inch when the warm air hit her. Are you hungry? He asked. No, Emily said. Yes, Emma said simultaneously. They looked at each other. We haven't eaten since this morning, Emma said, addressing the admission to the windshield rather than to Jack. Okay, he started the car. We'll fix that. He drove. He didn't explain where they were going. They didn't ask. The city moved past the windows, still wet, the rain having slowed to a thin, persistent mist that made the lights soft and indistinct. Jack drove on instinct, the route forming itself from 15 years of knowing this city the way a person knows their own house in the dark. Not by thinking about it, just by moving through it. Can I ask you something? Emily said. Sure. Are you actually in the Mafia? The question came out so direct, so completely without preamble, that for a fraction of a second, Jack's expression did something it almost never did. It surprised itself. He caught it and put it back. What makes you ask that? The man at the café, the way he looked at you when you said your name, like he'd heard it before and it scared him a little. You noticed that. I notice things, Emily said simply. No pride in it, just fact. Jack was quiet for a moment. The honest answer, he said, is that it's complicated. That's a grown-up way of saying yes, Emma said from the door side. Jack almost smiled. Almost. Yeah, he said. I guess it is. Are you going to help our mom? Emily again. Yes. Why? He thought about that. It was a fair question. It was the kind of question that deserved something real, not a comfortable answer. Because somebody should, he said. And right now I'm the somebody who's in the best position to. Emily was quiet for a moment. Then, our dad used to say something like that. What'd he say? He said if you can do something about a wrong thing and you don't, then you're part of the wrong thing. She paused. He said that a lot, right before he left and didn't come back. The bitterness in it was thin and precise, like a blade worn down to its finest edge. Jack didn't offer anything in response to that. Some things didn't need a response. They just needed to be heard. He pulled up to a diner on Clement Street that he knew stayed open until midnight. He sat in the car for a moment after he cut the engine, thinking, running the numbers, Dellen facility, Route 9, 8 men on the night rotation, a man named Gregor Voss, who was 2 days from moving everything and disappearing. 2 days was enough. 2 days was almost generous. Almost. Okay, he said, food first, then I make some calls. He looked at both of them. And I need you to tell me everything you can remember about where your mom is. Everything, even the things that seem small. Emma nodded immediately. Emily was looking out the windshield. She's going to be okay, she said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even really directed at Jack. It was the thing she was telling herself. The thing she had probably been telling herself for 3 days. The sentence she had been running on repeat like a generator keeping the lights on. Yes, Jack said, quiet and certain. She turned and looked at him. I don't make promises I can't keep, he said. That's not what I'm doing. I'm telling you what's going to happen. Your mother is going to be okay. Emily held his gaze for a long moment. 8 years old. Eyes that had been doing the work of someone much older for longer than was fair. Then she nodded once, short and sharp, the nod of someone filing a piece of information in a place they intend to return to. They got out of the car. Inside the diner, Jack ordered coffee for himself and whatever the girls wanted, which turned out to be grilled cheese for Emma and a bowl of tomato soup for Emily. And then he excused himself to the back hallway near the restrooms and made 2 calls standing against the wall, with one eye on the booth where both twins were sitting. The first call was to a man named Holt, ex-military, currently working in a capacity that Jack had never asked him to describe precisely, but which had, over the years, proven reliable and efficient in ways that the law couldn't always manage. I need a full layout of a facility off Route 9, past the Dellon rail yard. I need it tonight. Give me 2 hours, Holt said. You've got 90 minutes. The second call was back to Danny. He talking? Like a man who wants tomorrow to happen, Danny said. Good. Get everything he knows about Voss. Movements, associates, communication channels, everything. Jack paused. And Danny, yeah, he gives you anything about other locations, other facilities. You write it down and you call Reeves directly. Not me, Reeves. A pause. You sure about that, boss? Some things need to go through the right channels, Jack said. This is one of them. He hung up and stood in the hallway for a moment, looking at the 2 girls in the booth. Emily was eating her soup with careful, deliberate spoonfuls. Emma had already eaten half the grilled cheese and was looking out the window at the street with the alert, watchful attention of someone who had not yet allowed themselves to fully believe that they were safe. She wasn't wrong to be cautious. They weren't safe yet, but they were safer than they'd been 2 hours ago. Jack walked back to the booth and sat down and picked up his coffee. Emma looked at him. You made calls. I did. To who? People who are going to help. Your people? Some of them. He picked up the cup. Some of them belong to a different category. The legal kind? Emily said. Jack took a sip, set the cup down. Something like that. Emma was quiet for a moment. She picked up the other half of her grilled cheese, put it down, picked it up again. There are other women there, she said, not just our mom. We heard Victor talking on the phone once. He said there were women from 3 different states. Her voice had gone very careful, very controlled. The same worn, smooth cadence as when she'd talked about her father. We didn't understand what he meant, but we knew it was bad. It is bad, Jack said, no softening it. But we're going to do something about that too. All of them? Emily looked up from her soup. All of them, Jack said, and he meant it. He hadn't meant to mean it. He had come into this evening planning to end the immediate threat and hand the rest of it to Reeves and walk back to whatever version of Thursday still existed on the other side of all this. But sitting across from 2 children who had run through the rain and trusted a stranger and held his sleeve like it was the last solid thing in a world that kept moving underneath them. The exit he'd been planning no longer had the same shape. He drank his coffee, watched the street through the window, ran the numbers again. 8 men on the night rotation, 90 minutes for Holt to get him a layout. 2 days before Voss moved. He had time. Not a lot, but enough. Emma had finished the grilled cheese. She was looking at him with a directness that he was starting to recognize as simply how she looked at things. No performance, no softening, just looking, processing, deciding. You're not what I thought a mafia boss would be like, she said. What did you think? She considered it seriously. Louder, she said finally. I thought they were louder. Jack looked at her. Something moved in his chest. Not a smile exactly, something behind a smile. Something warmer and quieter. Most things that are actually dangerous are quiet, he said. Emma thought about that, nodded slowly, the way children nod when they're filing something away for later. Yeah, she said, I think that's right. Outside, the mist had thickened back into rain. The street was wet and dark and full of the indifferent movement of a city that didn't know what was sitting in this booth, what was at stake 2 miles away off Route 9, what was about to be set in motion before this night was finished. Jack's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. Holt. The layout was ready, 90 minutes ahead of schedule. Jack looked at both girls one more time. Soup bowl nearly empty, grilled cheese completely gone, 2 sets of brown eyes that had no business carrying as much as they were carrying, and then he picked up the phone and answered it. Talk to me, he said, and the last part of this night shifted into gear. Holt's voice on the phone was the kind of voice that had been places and done things, and had long since stopped needing to impress anyone about either. Flat, efficient, delivered information the way a machine delivers output, without color, without hesitation, without any of the editorial padding that less experienced men use to fill silence. 12,000 square feet, single story, reinforced loading doors on the north and east faces, generator on the south exterior, 2 guard positions at ground level, front approach and the rear service corridor. Interior camera system runs on a separate circuit from the main power. You cut the main, the cameras stay live. A pause. Whoever set this up knew what they were doing. How many access points that aren't monitored? 1. West side utility access leads into a maintenance corridor that connects to the main floor. Camera blind spot. Whoever set the system up assumed nobody was coming through a 3-foot utility crawl. Another pause. They assumed wrong. How confident are you in this layout? Confident enough that I go in on it myself. Holt paused. I'm not going in on it myself. I know. Jack was already thinking past the call, running men and positions and timing through the part of his mind that had been doing this kind of calculation for 2 decades. Send it to Marcus's phone. Everything you have. Already sent. A beat. Jack? Yeah. The intel I pulled to build that layout, there's more in there than just the facility. There are transaction records, movement logs, names. Holt's voice stayed flat, but there was something underneath it now. Something careful. This isn't a local operation. I know. I mean, it's significantly not local. The kind of not local that, if certain people find out you're the one who knocked it over, they're going to want a conversation. Let them want one, Jack said. Holt was quiet for a moment. All right, he said, and hung up. Jack stood in the diner hallway and looked at the booth. Both girls were sitting quietly, Emily's soup bowl pushed to one side, Emma with her hands folded on the table in front of her, like a child waiting for a test to start. Neither of them was talking. They were just sitting together in the particular silence of people who had been through enough that silence no longer frightened them. He went back to the table. We need to move, he said. Not far. I'm taking you somewhere safe while I handle the next part. Emily looked at him immediately. We're not going with you? No. Why? Because where I'm going isn't somewhere children go. He said it straightforwardly. No softening, no apology. I have someone I trust who will stay with you. You'll be safe, you'll be warm, and you'll know the moment your mother is out. Emma was watching him. How will we know? Because I'll tell you myself. You'll come back again, Emma said. This time it wasn't a question. It was something she was deciding to believe, and the decision was visible on her face. Deliberate, a little defiant, like someone planting a flag in uncertain ground. I'll come back, Jack said. He left $40 on the table for a $12 check and walked both girls out to the car. The woman he was taking them to was named Ruth Calder. She was 63 years old, lived alone in a house on Birch Street that she kept warm enough to make most people take their coat off within 30 seconds of stepping through the door. And she had known Jack since he was 19 and making the kind of choices that people who knew better tried to talk him out of. She had been one of the people who tried. It hadn't worked. But they had maintained something across the years that defied the ordinary categories. Not family, not employer and employee, not quite friends. Something older and harder to name, built from the fact that she was one of roughly 4 people on Earth who told Jack Colton the truth to his face without calculating the cost of it first. He called her from the car. She picked up on the second ring, which meant she was awake, which was not surprising since Ruth Calder maintained that sleeping before 11 was something people did when they had run out of things to think about. "I need you to do something for me," he said. "You always need me to do something for you when you call at 9:30. This one matters." A brief pause. "They all matter to you, Jack. That's the problem." But her voice had already shifted, softer, readied. "What is it?" "2 girls, 8, 9 years old, twins. I need them with someone I trust for a few hours." Silence on the line. Not the silence of hesitation, the silence of someone processing quickly and efficiently. "Are they hurt?" "No, scared. They're holding it together better than most adults I know, but they've had a bad few days and they need somewhere that feels safe." "Bring them," Ruth said simply. And then, before he could respond, "And Jack, are you going somewhere dangerous tonight?" "Somewhat. On a scale." "6, he said. "You'd say 6 if it was 9. "Then why do you ask?" She made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "Because one of these days you might tell me the truth, and I want to be ready for it." She hung up. Jack glanced at both girls. Emily was watching him. Emma had her forehead tilted toward the window, watching the city. "Who's Ruth?" Emily asked. "Someone good," Jack said. Ruth met them at the door before they'd finished coming up the front steps, which meant she'd been watching from the window, which meant she had been worrying from the moment she hung up the phone. She took one look at both girls, wet-haired, shadows under their eyes, wearing the particular expression of children who have been carrying something too heavy for too long, and she stepped back and opened the door wider and said, come in, it's cold," in a tone that made it sound like she'd been expecting them for days and was mildly annoyed it had taken them this long to arrive. Emma went in first. Ruth looked at Jack over Emma's head. The look lasted about 2 seconds and contained a complete conversation that didn't need words. Jack nodded once. Ruth nodded back. "Go," she said quietly. "I've got them." He was back in the car in under a minute. He called Marcus. "Where are we?" "Danny's got everything from Victor. I'm sending it to you now. Voss runs 4 facilities total. Dellen is the primary right now. The other 3 are in rotation. He moves the women every 3 to 4 weeks to prevent patterns." Marcus's voice was steady, informational. Victor also confirmed there are 11 women currently at Dellen. Sarah Carver is in the secondary holding area, separate from the main group. She was separated 2 days ago. Why separated? A pause. She apparently made enough trouble in the first 24 hours that Voss had her moved to keep her from organizing the other women. Jack absorbed that. The woman had been in a trafficking facility for 3 days, alone, separated as a problem case because she'd refused to stop being a problem. He thought about Emma's worn, smooth voice saying she hadn't believed Victor. He thought about Emily saying he'd said 6, if it was 9. The daughters made a lot more sense now. 11 women, Jack said. That changes the operation. "Yeah," Marcus said. "I figured you'd say that. I need more men. Who've we got available tonight?" "I've already called. We've got 8, including me and Danny. Holt sent his layout to my phone. I've been going over it. We can move in 2 teams. Primary breach through the north loading doors, while a second team comes through the west utility access and cuts across to the secondary holding area where Carver is. Hit both at the same time. Keep the guards split." The camera circuit. Holt's guy can pull it offline remotely, but it'll only stay down for about 4 minutes before the backup kicks in. 4 minutes is enough, Jack said. He was already driving. Route 9 was 20 minutes east on a dry road. Tonight it would be 25. Get everyone staged at the old Dellon rail yard. I want to be moving at 11. Copy that, Marcus paused. Jack, Reeves. I'll call him when we're in position. He moves after us, not with us. He's not going to like that. He's going to like the alternative less. Jack pressed the phone harder to his ear. 11 women, Marcus, not one. That's a federal case. I want Reeves there to take custody of everything before any of Voss's people can get a lawyer on the phone and start making problems. Understood, Marcus said and hung up. Jack drove. The rain had settled into something steady and committed, the kind that doesn't announce itself or apologize, just falls because it's going to fall. He drove through it with both hands on the wheel and his mind running the operation in the background. Breach points, timing, contingencies, the 4-minute window on the cameras, 8 men against 8 guards if Victor's count was accurate, which Jack estimated at maybe 70% likely and was planning for the 30% accordingly. He was 12 minutes from the rail yard when his phone rang. Number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer it. Something made him, not instinct exactly, more like the particular gravity of a night that had already surprised him several times and seemed to have more surprises still queued up. Mr. Colton. The voice was unhurried, slightly accented, the English of someone educated in it rather than born to it, precise and unbothered, and carrying the specific texture of a person accustomed to being the most important person in any room they entered. Jack's hands tightened on the wheel by a fraction. Mr. Voss, he said. A pause, small, appreciative, the pause of someone who is pleased not to have to introduce himself. You've had a productive evening. Getting there. Victor has always been, let us say, inconsistent under pressure. A sound that might have been a sigh. I want you to know before tonight goes any further that what I'm doing at the Dellon facility is considerably larger than a single city operation. The infrastructure involved, the logistics, the reach, dismantling one location accomplishes almost nothing. It accomplishes something for the 11 women inside it, Jack said. A pause. Yes, Voss said. I suppose it does. No shame in it, no defense, just acknowledgement, the way someone acknowledges a mathematical fact. I'm calling because I want to offer you an alternative to what you're planning. You're a businessman. I'm a businessman. There are arrangements. I'm going to stop you there, Jack said. Mr. Colton, no. His voice hadn't changed volume, hadn't changed temperature, but something in it had shifted. Something that came up from a place deeper than strategy, deeper than calculation. Something that had been sitting in his chest since Emma said the word mom, with her forehead pressed against a car window. There's no arrangement. There's no conversation. There's no version of tonight where you and I reach a mutual understanding. Are we clear? Silence on the line. I know who you are, Voss said finally, and now the unbothered quality had thinned slightly, something colder showing underneath. I know your organization. I know your people. I know the 3 things you value above everything else. A pause. Don't make me demonstrate that I know them. Jack pulled into the rail yard and cut the engine. His men were already there. He could see the dark shapes of cars and the glowing ends of cigarettes and the movement of people who were ready to move and were waiting for the word. Mr. Voss, Jack said, let me tell you what I know. I know you're at the Dellon facility right now, or within a few miles of it, because you called me. You called me because Victor talked, and you found out about it fast enough that you're still trying to manage this, which means you haven't run yet, which means you think there's still something to manage. He paused. There isn't, but thank you for telling me you're close. He ended the call. He sat in the car for exactly 3 seconds. Then he got out. Marcus was at his side before he'd taken 4 steps. That was Voss. Jack kept walking toward the group. He's in the area, might be at the facility, might be close. Either way, we move now, not at 11. Clock just moved up. Marcus absorbed this without breaking stride. 10 minutes to get in position? Make it 8. He reached the group. 7 men, competent and quiet, waiting with the particular patience of people who knew what they were about to do and had made their peace with it. Danny was on the left, closest to the car, looking at Jack with an expression that asked the question his mouth hadn't yet. "Change of plans," Jack said. He kept his voice level and direct. No theater. These were men who had worked with him long enough that theater was an insult. "Voss knows we're coming. We have a small window before he either runs or hardens the facility. We move in 8 minutes. Primary team, you're hitting the north loading doors. Marcus leads, 4 men, breach on my signal. Second team, Danny, you're taking 3 men through the west utility corridor. Your target is the secondary holding area. That's where Sarah Carver is. You get her out first, everyone else after." He looked around the group. "The women inside don't know who we are or why we're there. They are frightened. They have been through things we are not going to think about right now. You treat every single one of them with care. Anyone who comes in armed and isn't one of ours is a threat. Anyone who isn't armed and isn't one of ours is a victim. Don't confuse the two." Nods, no questions. "Reeves moves in 20 minutes after we do," Jack continued. "By then I want every guard neutralized, every woman accounted for, and Voss, if he's inside, in a condition to be handed over." He paused. "Not a worse condition. Reeves needs him talking." One of the men in the back, younger, newer, still calibrating where the lines were, said, "And if Voss runs?" "He doesn't run," Jack said simply. And then, because the man was new and the line needed to be clear, "We are not the end of this. We are the beginning of the end of this. Reeves and his people are the end of it. Our job tonight is to open the door. Their job is to walk through it with everything that matters. So we do this right." He called Reeves while the men were getting to their vehicles. 2 rings. "Tell me you have something," Reeves said. "I have everything." Jack read out the address. "I need you staged outside in 20 minutes. Wait for my call before you come in." "Jack, I can't just—" 20 minutes, Carl." He almost never used Reeves's first name. The detective went quiet. "There are 11 women inside that building. I need enough time to make sure they're out of the crossfire before your people come in loud. 20 minutes. A long pause. 20 minutes, Reeves said. "And then I'm coming in regardless. That's all I'm asking." He hung up and got in the car with Marcus and a man named Cole, who had been with Jack for 9 years and had never once needed to be told anything twice. As they pulled out of the rail yard, Marcus said quietly, without looking away from the road, "You know if Voss is inside, this gets messier." "I know. He called you personally. That means he respects you enough to try the conversation first." Marcus paused. "That also means he's scared enough that the conversation felt necessary." "Good," Jack said. "Scared makes people sloppy." They drove in silence for a minute. The facility was 5 minutes out. Jack could feel the shift in the car, the particular compression of atmosphere that happened in the minutes before something difficult, the way the air changed quality when everything became very immediate and very real. His phone buzzed. Ruth. He almost didn't answer. Then he did. "Jack." Her voice was soft, which immediately put him on a different kind of alert. Ruth Calder was many things. Soft was rarely one of them. "The little one, Emma, she hasn't said anything since you left. She just sits and looks at her hands." A pause. "The other one, Emily, she's been talking to me. She told me about their father, about the last 8 months." Another pause, smaller. "Jack, what these children have been carrying." "I know," he said. "She asked me if you were going to be okay tonight." Something moved through his chest, quick and sharp and gone before he could name it. Which one? Emma, Ruth paused. She made me promise to tell her if something happened to you. Jack was quiet. She's 8 years old and she's sitting at my kitchen table bargaining with outcomes she can't control, Ruth said. Because that's what she knows how to do. That's what she's been doing since her father left. Tell her I'm going to be fine, Jack said. Is that the truth? He watched the dark road ahead, thought about a man named Voss who was close enough to call him, thought about 8 guards on a night rotation, thought about a 4-minute camera window and 11 women and a utility crawl and all the things that could shift between intention and outcome in the span of a breath. It's what I intend to be, he said. Ruth accepted that in the way Ruth accepted most things Jack told her, with a silence that communicated exactly how much of it she believed and exactly how much she was going to worry regardless. Come back, she said. Yes, ma'am. He hung up as Marcus pulled the car to a stop on the dark service road behind the facility. Through the windshield, the building sat heavy and silent in the rain, every exterior light cutting hard yellow angles into the wet dark. Marcus looked at him. Ready? Jack checked his watch, 17 minutes before Reeves moved. He thought about Emma's hands folded on a diner table. He thought about Emily's voice saying he'd be back. He thought about Sarah Carver, separated into a back room for 3 days because she'd refused to stop fighting. Ready, he said, and they moved. The 4-minute window started the moment Cole sent the signal to Holt's contact, and the camera circuit went dark. Jack was already moving. The utility corridor was exactly what Holt had described. Narrow, low, smelling of rust and standing water, and the particular staleness of a space that had never been intended for human use, beyond the occasional maintenance visit. Cole went first, Jack behind him, Marcus pulling the rear. No flashlights. They moved by feel and memory, and the faint industrial glow that leaked under the door at the corridor's far end. 20 seconds in, Jack heard the first sound from the north side. The loading doors, Marcus's primary team making contact. A shout, a crash of something metal, the flat, percussive sound of a confrontation compressing itself into its smallest possible footprint because everyone involved had been told to keep it fast and quiet, and they were all professionals in their respective capacities. Cole reached the interior door and looked back at Jack. Jack nodded. Cole pushed through. The main floor opened up, large, cold, the kind of space that swallowed sound instead of returning it. 2 guards were already responding to the noise from the north side, moving away, backs turned. Cole took the one on the left. Jack took the right. Both done in under 8 seconds. Both men on the ground. Neither one going to be comfortable for a while, but neither one more seriously damaged than that. Jack keyed his earpiece. Main floor, 2 down. Danny, report. Danny's voice came back immediately, slightly compressed with exertion. Secondary corridor, we're 30 seconds out. 1 guard between us and the holding area. He's aware. A beat. Was aware. Carver? Not yet, almost there. Jack was already moving toward the back of the main floor, where the primary holding area was. A converted storage section, heavy door, padlock on the outside that told him everything he needed to know about how voluntary the arrangement was. Cole was beside him. He could hear Marcus's team on the north side, the controlled chaos of a breach going better than expected. 2 guards down out there, 1 more being handled, the 4th and 5th nowhere yet accounted for. He reached the holding room door. The padlock was industrial but not complicated. Cole had it off in 40 seconds with tools that looked unremarkable and worked precisely. Jack pulled the door open. The room held 10 women. He had prepared himself, or thought he had. He had run this moment through his mind on the drive over, and in the corridor, and in the 20 steps between the main floor and this door, and he had thought he had built an adequate version of what he would find. He had not built an adequate version. 10 women, different ages, different backgrounds, all of them carrying in their faces and their postures the specific damage of people who have been held against their will and have gradually, reluctantly, stopped expecting the door to open for any good reason. When it did open, none of them moved toward it. That was the thing that hit him hardest. Not the fear, he had expected fear. The stillness, the complete absence of the instinct to run, which meant the instinct had been disciplined out of them over time, replaced with something smaller and more survivable. A woman near the back stood up first. She was in her 40s, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that had been strong before exhaustion got to it, and was still strong underneath the exhaustion. She looked at Jack and at Cole and did the rapid calculation of threat versus possibility with eyes that were red-rimmed but absolutely alert. "We're getting you out," Jack said, quietly, directly. "There are more of my people in this building, and there's law enforcement coming in approximately 12 minutes. You are safe. You are going home." The woman near the back said, "Who are you?" "Someone who was in the right place tonight," Jack said. "That's all that matters right now. Can you walk?" "Yes," she said, and her voice broke on the word, and she put it back together in the same breath. "Yes, all of us can walk." "Then let's move." His earpiece crackled. Danny's voice, and the quality of it was different, tighter, with something underneath that made Jack stop moving for a half second. "Jack, I've got Carver." "Status?" A pause that lasted too long. "She's okay, she's okay, but you need to hear something. She's been talking to me for the last 40 seconds and..." Another pause. "Voss is in the building. He came in through the north service entrance about 10 minutes ago. He's not in the main facility. He's in the office suite on the upper level." Jack processed this in the time it took to exhale. Upper level? How many with him? Carver heard two voices besides his. "Copy." He looked at Cole. "Get these women to the north exterior. Marcus's team will cover you out." He keyed his earpiece again. "Marcus." "Here. Upper level, office suite, Voss +2. I'm going up." "A beat. I'm coming with you." "Stay with the extraction. Cole needs cover getting 10 women out of a building that still has at least 2 guards unaccounted for." He was already moving toward the stairwell access he'd memorized from Holt's layout. "I'll take the upper level." "Jack!" "I need you down here, Marcus. This isn't the moment." Marcus went quiet, which meant he understood and hated it in equal measure, which was fine. Jack could live with both. He took the stairs. The office suite was at the top, a converted mezzanine level, originally designed for facility management, repurposed for something else entirely. Jack could hear voices before he reached the top step. Not arguing, controlled discussion, rapid, the sound of people making decisions under time pressure that had just become considerably more acute. He pushed through the door. Voss was standing at a desk, a phone pressed to his ear, his back half turned. 2 men flanked him, both larger than Jack, both armed, both already turning when the door opened because they had heard him on the stairs and were good enough at their jobs to be ready. Jack was faster, not dramatically, not cinematically, just the ordinary faster of someone who had been doing this for 20 years and had stopped wasting motion somewhere around year 8. The first man went down hard and stayed down. The second got one hand on Jack's jacket before Jack redirected the grip and the momentum behind it into a wall. And the sound that followed was the sound of something yielding that was not the wall. Voss had turned during all of this. He had lowered the phone. He was looking at Jack with an expression that was remarkably composed for a man whose 2-man security detail had just been removed from the conversation in approximately 7 seconds. Still that same controlled quality, unbothered on the surface, calculating underneath. A man who had spent his professional life treating other people as variables and was now in the process of recognizing that he had badly miscalculated this particular one. "Mr. Colton," he said. "Mr. Voss." Jack straightened his jacket, looked at him across the desk, put the phone down. Voss set it on the desk. "My people know I'm here. Your people are going to have bigger problems than you in about 9 minutes when Detective Carl Reeves comes through that loading door with a federal warrant and a very detailed set of transaction records. Jack watched Voss's face. The mention of the transaction records did something. Small, controlled, but there. Holt sends his regards. Voss was quiet for a moment. Then, "You've been thorough." "I try to be." "The transaction records alone won't." "Give Reeves what he needs to pull the thread," Jack said. "And once he pulls the thread, the rest of it comes apart. You know that. I know that. So we can skip the part where you explain to me how the legal situation is more complicated than I understand." He kept his eyes on Voss's face. "It's not more complicated. You are going to be handed to Detective Reeves. You are going to cooperate with a federal investigation. And the 4 facilities you're running are going to be shut down inside of 30 days. Something shifted in Voss's expression. Small, but real. 4, he said. You have 4 facilities in rotation. Dellon, the Carver Street location in Pittsburgh, 1 outside Columbus, and 1 in Memphis that you've been using for less than a month. So the records are thinner, but not absent. Jack paused. Did I miss one? Voss looked at him for a long moment. No, he said quietly. You didn't miss one. Then we understand each other. You realize, Voss said, that even after tonight, even with the investigation, operations like this don't end. They relocate, they restructure. In 8 months, someone else is running this same network under a different name. Maybe, Jack said, but not you, and not these women, and not those 2 girls. He let that land. The ones whose father you used as leverage to get to their mother. The ones who ran through the rain tonight and grabbed the sleeve of a stranger because they had no other options. He held Voss's gaze. That ends tonight. Whatever happens in 8 months, that ends tonight. Voss was quiet for several seconds. The building around them had gone quieter too. The sounds of the extraction wrapping up below. The controlled exit of 10 women moving toward the north loading doors. The distant, approaching sound of vehicles that would be Reeves arriving early because Reeves was always early when it mattered. You're an unusual man, Mr. Colton, Voss said finally. So I've been told. You run an organization that operates outside the law. You do things that bear a considerable resemblance to what I do. No, Jack said, simply, flatly, without heat. It doesn't resemble what you do, not even a little. Voss tilted his head slightly, curious, not challenging. Where's the line? People who can say no, Jack said. Everyone who works for me works for me. Everyone who disagrees with me leaves. Nobody in my organization is there because I took something they loved and told them compliance was the only way to get it back. He paused. That's the line. It's not a complicated line. Voss considered this. Then something unexpected happened. He sat down in the chair behind the desk, not collapsing, not defeated, just sitting, and he put both hands flat on the desk surface, and he looked at them. I have a daughter, he said, 22. She thinks I'm in logistics. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. Jack looked at him. She's going to find out. Yes. Voss's voice was very even. She will. Tonight, if it's not already. Yes. He was still looking at his hands. I know. Jack said nothing. There was nothing to say to that. No comfort available, none appropriate, none that Jack was in any position to offer. This was a man sitting with the weight of what his choices were going to cost people he hadn't intended to cost them. And that particular weight was not Jack's to lift. His earpiece crackled. Danny's voice, and the quality was entirely different now. Something warm in it, something that Danny would have denied if asked about it directly. Jack, we're clear. All 11 accounted for. Carver is with us. She needs to hear from you. Jack crossed the room to the door and looked back at Voss. Don't move, he said. Reeves is going to want to find you sitting exactly where you are. He stepped into the corridor and pressed the earpiece. Put her on. A moment, some quiet movement, then a voice. Not at all what he'd expected, and completely exactly what he should have expected given whose mother she was. Clear, controlled, still carrying the edge of 3 days of something terrible, but not broken by it, not even close. "This is Sarah Carver. My name is Jack Colton," he said. "Your daughters are safe. They're with someone I trust. They've been asking about you since the moment I met them." A sound on the line, brief, involuntary, the kind of sound that comes out when the wall you've been holding up for 3 days suddenly doesn't need to hold anymore. Just one sound, swallowed almost immediately. Then, "Both of them are okay?" Both of them. Emma ate half a grilled cheese in under 4 minutes. Emily corrected a man on her own name with so much calm certainty that I'm still thinking about it. A sound that was closer to a laugh this time, wet at the edges. "That's Emily." Her voice broke slightly and came back. "That's exactly Emily." "They're waiting for you," Jack said. "We're going to get you to them." A pause. "Mr. Colton, I don't know who you are or why you did this, but—" "You can tell me later," he said quietly. "Right now, Danny's going to walk you to a car and get you moving, okay?" "Okay," she said, and then, quickly, before the line transferred, "Thank you." He handed it back to Danny without answering her. Some things didn't need an answer so much as they needed to be allowed to sit. He walked back into the office suite. Voss hadn't moved. 30 seconds later, he could hear them below. Multiple vehicles, organized entry, the sound of law enforcement coming through a door with the specific authority of a warrant. Reeves always had a particular cadence to how he entered a space. Not aggressive, not theatrical, just relentlessly purposeful. The cadence of a man who had been building toward this kind of moment across an entire career and was not going to waste it with unnecessary noise. Jack came down the stairs as Reeves was coming through the north loading doors. They met in the middle of the main floor, surrounded by the organized movement of federal agents, and the quiet disbelief of Reeves, taking in a facility that was already cleared, already contained, women already evacuated, 2 men already restrained on the ground. Reeves looked at Jack, looked at the room, looked back at Jack. "You said 20 minutes, Reeves said. "I said you should wait 20 minutes. I didn't say I would." "Jack." "Voss is upstairs, office suite, second door on the left, sitting at the desk. He hasn't been touched. He's in a talkative mood." Jack met Reeves's eyes. "He has information about the other 3 facilities. He'll give it to you. He's decided cooperation is his best option, and I think he's right." Reeves was staring at him with the expression of a man trying to decide between 2 deeply opposed reactions. "How did you—" "Transaction records are on a laptop on his desk. Holt's contact pulled remote copies 3 hours ago, and they're already in your email. I sent them before we entered the facility." He paused. "You're welcome." "I should arrest you," Reeves said. "You should go talk to Voss before he changes his mind," Jack said. "The cooperative window on a man like that is not unlimited." Reeves held his gaze for a long moment, the particular frustrated respect of a man who needed something to be illegal and couldn't quite make it be. Then he turned and walked toward the stairs, already pulling out his phone, already back in the role that the night had given him. Jack found Marcus near the north exit. "Everyone out?" Jack asked. "Everyone. 10 women from the primary hold, Carver from the secondary. Danny's in the second car with Carver heading toward—" "Where are we taking her?" "Ruth's." Jack started moving toward the exit. "Tell Danny to take her to Ruth's." Marcus relayed it. Then after a beat, "You're hit." Jack glanced down at his side. There was a dark stain on his jacket, lower left, that had been there since the second guard on the main floor had gotten a hand on him before going down. He had felt the blade, brief, not deep, the kind of thing adrenaline handles for you until adrenaline is done with you. It's minor. "Let me see." "In the car." "Jack." "In the car, Marcus." They got in the car. Marcus looked at it, made a sound of professional assessment rather than alarm. The sound of someone determining that the situation was manageable, and did not require dramatics. You need it closed. I know a person. Of course you do. Marcus sat back. Ruth's going to say I told you so. Ruth always says I told you so. Because you always give her reasons to. Marcus started the car. The girls don't know you're hurt. They're not going to know I'm hurt. Jack, they've had enough tonight. His voice came out more clipped than he intended, the adrenaline finishing its job and leaving behind it the ordinary weight of a man who had been moving very fast for several hours and was now decelerating into the reality of everything that movement had cost. They don't need one more thing to worry about, not tonight. Marcus drove. He didn't argue. He knew Jack well enough to know when the position was final and when it was negotiable. And this was a man who had just spent the last 3 hours making decisions on behalf of 2 children he'd met 90 minutes before that, and the position was not negotiable. The rain had gone thin again, barely missed. The city was somewhere past midnight, quiet in the way cities go quiet when only the people with reasons to be out at that hour are out at that hour. Jack sat in the passenger seat with one hand pressed carefully against his left side and watched the lights go by and thought about nothing in particular, or tried to. The mind doesn't always cooperate with trying to think about nothing. He thought about Victor's face in the cafe booth when it finally dropped the performance. He thought about Voss sitting at that desk with his hands flat on the surface, looking at them. He thought about Sarah Carver's voice on the phone, that single swallowed sound when the wall came down. He thought about the 10 women in that holding room, so disciplined by fear that they'd stop moving toward an open door. He thought about Emma's fingers on his sleeve, the small, cold weight of them. The absolute certainty of a child who had made a decision in the rain and was not undoing it regardless of what the next hour held. 8 years old, and she had looked at a man in a dark suit with a weapon under his jacket, and she had run straight to him because something in her had known, or decided to know, that he was the right person. He hoped she was right. He had tried to be. He thought that was probably all anyone could ever do. Try to be the thing that someone running through the rain toward you deserved to find. His phone buzzed. Ruth. He answered it. Danny just called, she said. He's 10 minutes out. I know. The girls are awake. Emma's been awake the whole time. She never slept. Ruth's voice was steady, but the thing underneath it was not. Jack, she sat in that chair for 2 hours, and she didn't sleep, and she didn't cry, and she didn't say anything except... Ruth stopped. What? She kept asking me if I thought you were the kind of man who did what he said he'd do. A pause. I told her yes. I told her absolutely yes. And I want you to know I meant it. Another pause, smaller. And I also want you to know that if you are bleeding right now, and I suspect you might be because Marcus sent me a very careful text message that was trying very hard not to alarm me, I am going to have opinions about it. Jack looked at the dark stain on his jacket. It's minor. The sound Ruth made when she had decided not to fight about something yet. Drive faster, she said, and hung up. Marcus had heard enough. He drove faster. They were 4 minutes from Birch Street when Jack's earpiece came back to life. Reeves, not Danny. Voss is talking, Reeves said. He sounded like a man in the middle of something large, and had paused briefly to report from the center of it. I mean, really talking. The other 3 facilities. He's giving us live operational details, personnel contacts, everything. We've already got 2 other field offices spinning up. A pause. Jack, there are currently 63 women across those 4 facilities. The number landed. Jack sat with it. 63 women. The transaction records on a laptop. A man named Voss who had sat at a desk with his hands flat in front of him and decided that whatever came next, he was going to meet it directly. 63 women who were going to be found tonight because 2 little girls had run through the rain to a stranger and grabbed his sleeve. Good, he said. His voice came out quieter than he intended. Good. Reeves repeated, with a tone that suggested he was still processing the scale of it himself. Yeah, good is one word for it. A pause. I'm not saying thank you. I'm not asking you to. I'm saying it anyway. Reeves paused. Don't make me do it again. I'll do my best, Jack said, and ended the call. Marcus had gone very still in the driver's seat, which meant he had heard enough of that to understand the number, and was handling the understanding of it the way Marcus handled most large things. By not performing a reaction, just absorbing it, filing it somewhere it could be examined later when there was time. They turned onto Birch Street. The lights in Ruth's house were all on. Marcus pulled up to Ruth's house and Jack was out of the car before it fully stopped moving, which was either determination or the particular stubbornness of a man who knew that if he sat still too long, his body was going to start submitting invoices for the evening's expenses. The front door opened before he reached the steps. Ruth stood in the doorway with the expression of a woman who had been managing her reaction for the last 40 minutes and had now run out of patience for managing it. She looked at him, his face first, then his jacket, then back to his face, and she said nothing. The nothing was very loud. I'm fine, Jack said. You are not fine, Ruth said. Come inside. He came inside. The house was exactly what it always was. Warm, lit, smelling of coffee and the faint lavender of whatever Ruth washed her curtains with. The kind of warmth that didn't ask anything from you, just received you. Jack had been walking through that door for over 20 years, and it had never once felt like anything other than the closest thing to safe he had ever found. Emma was in the hallway. She was standing at the edge of it, in the space between the entryway and the kitchen, still in the blue raincoat that had dried over the past few hours into something rumpled and slightly stiff. She was looking at Jack with an expression that was trying very hard to be neutral and was not quite succeeding, the effort visible in the set of her jaw, the careful stillness of her hands at her sides, the 2 hours of not sleeping and not crying that were written all over her face. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, You're hurt. Barely, Jack said. That's not the same as not. He looked at her, this 8-year-old girl who had spent 2 hours in a stranger's kitchen, bargaining with outcomes she couldn't control, who had sat in a chair without sleeping and asked a 63-year-old woman whether the man she trusted in the rain was the kind of man who did what he said he'd do. He had no adequate response to her. He just looked at her and he said, Your mother is 10 minutes away. Emma's face did something then that 2 hours of discipline and control had been holding back. Not tears, or not only tears, and not first. First, it was just the release of a held breath, a long, shaking exhale that seemed to come from somewhere much deeper than her lungs. The sound of a weight being set down after an exceptionally long carry. Then her chin moved. Then her eyes went bright, and she pressed both hands against her face and stood there in the hallway, doing the complicated, private work of feeling something enormous. Jack did not move toward her. He understood, instinctively, that this was not a moment that needed anything from him. It only needed space. Ruth appeared at his shoulder with a look that said everything about what she thought of his jacket and handed him a folded kitchen towel without a word. He pressed it against his left side and did not react to the pressure, which cost him something. And Ruth watched him not react and added it to the list of opinions she was going to have later. Emily came out of the kitchen. She looked at Jack with the direct, assessing gaze that he had been cataloging since the café, the gaze of someone who checked things against reality rather than against what she wanted reality to be. She looked at the towel pressed against his side. She looked at his face. She looked at Emma in the hallway doing the difficult work of coming back together. She's really coming, Emily said. Not a question, but needing to say it out loud to make it real. She's really coming, Jack said. Emily nodded, one precise downward nod. Then she walked over to her sister and stood beside her and didn't say anything, just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, which was exactly what was needed in exactly what Emily always seemed to know. Ruth steered Jack firmly into the kitchen and made him sit at the table and had the first aid kit open before he'd fully settled into the chair. Because Ruth Calder kept a first aid kit substantial enough to suggest she had always expected that knowing Jack Colton would eventually require it. "Take the jacket off," she said. He took the jacket off. She looked at the wound with the clinical calm of someone who had seen worse and was nonetheless unhappy about this particular instance. "It's not deep," she said, "but it needs to be closed." "I know. Hold still." "I'm holding still." "You're thinking about leaving, and I can tell." She was already working, efficient and sure, not gentle in the way that people are gentle when they're worried, but competent in the way that people are competent when they've decided that competence is more useful than worry. "You're thinking about whatever's next. You're already past this room." "Ruth." "I'm not criticizing," she said. "I'm observing. Hold still." He held still. From the hallway, he could hear the quiet sound of the two girls, Emma's breathing evening out, Emily saying something low that he couldn't make out. The ordinary sound of two people who had each other, rebuilding from the edges in. His phone buzzed. Reeves. He answered it one-handed. "Tell me." "Pittsburgh field office is moving on the Carver Street location right now. Columbus and Memphis have warrants signed and teams staged." Reeves's voice had the quality of a man operating at the center of something with many moving parts and managing the velocity of it. "Voss's cooperation has been comprehensive, more comprehensive than I expected." A pause. "He asked for something." "What?" "He asked that his daughter be told before it hits the news." Reeves said it carefully, the way he said things he wasn't entirely sure how to feel about. "He gave us a name and a phone number. He said, and this is a direct quote, that she deserved to hear it from someone who would be honest with her, not from a breaking news banner." Jack was quiet for a moment. "That's not an unreasonable thing to want," he said. "No," Reeves agreed, "it's not." A pause. "I thought you'd say that." "Are you going to do it?" "I'm going to have someone do it, yes." Reeves cleared his throat. 63 women, Jack. Across 4 facilities, all of them accounted for by 6:30 this morning if the other operations go the way Dellen went. His voice was doing something that Reeves's voice very rarely did. It was carrying something. Not sentiment exactly, something harder than that, something that came from a long career of working toward moments that almost never look like this. 6:30 this morning, Jack pressed the towel against his side and said nothing. "All right," Reeves said. "Get some sleep, and next time, I'll call you first," Jack said. "You absolutely will not," Reeves said, and hung up. Ruth tied off the last closure, sat back and looked at her work with the expression of a craftsperson assessing something made under suboptimal conditions. "Good enough," she said, which from Ruth meant it was fine. "Don't twist." "I don't twist." "You are going to stand up in 30 seconds and move around this kitchen in ways that will require you not to twist, and I am asking you in advance not to do that." He looked at her. She was looking back at him with the particular directness of a woman who had watched him make hard choices for more than 2 decades and had never once pretended she didn't see the cost of them. 63, he said quietly. Ruth's expression shifted. Something in it opened slightly. "I heard. Emma and Emily, 2 girls in wet raincoats who ran through the rain and grabbed my sleeve." He set the phone down on the table. "That's where 63 comes from." Ruth was quiet for a moment, then she reached out and put one hand briefly on his forearm, not holding, just landing there for a second, the way you touch something to confirm it's real. "Yes," she said, "that's where 63 comes from." The front door opened. The sound that came from the hallway was not describable in any way that did it justice. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was the opposite of dramatic. It was the sound of ordinary, irreplaceable, impossible to manufacture relief. 2 voices, and one voice finding each other after 3 days of nothing. a mother and her daughters, the sound of the specific reunion that those specific three people had been waiting for across every hour of the last 72. Jack did not go to the hallway. He stayed at the kitchen table. He picked up his coffee. Ruth had set a fresh cup in front of him at some point in the last 5 minutes, because Ruth was the kind of person who made coffee the way other people provided oxygen, as a simple baseline requirement of a livable environment. And he drank it, and he listened to the sound from the hallway, and he let it be what it was, without making it about anything else. Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway, looked at Jack, looked at the taped-up wound, made the same professional assessment sound he'd made in the car, and then leaned against the doorframe with his arms folded and was quiet. After a while, Danny came in too. He poured himself coffee without being invited, which was Danny's way of saying he was comfortable, and stood beside the counter and also said nothing. The three of them sat in the kitchen while the hallway did what the hallway was doing, and nobody spoke, and it was one of the most decent silences Jack had been part of in recent memory. It was Emily who came through the kitchen doorway first. She walked in, looked at the three men and at Ruth, and then looked directly at Jack with that characteristic directness, checking him against her internal measurement of things, making sure reality matched the version she'd been defending in her head for the last 2 hours. "She's okay," Emily said, stating it, confirming it, making it a fact by saying it out loud with authority. "She's okay," Jack agreed. Emily crossed the kitchen and sat down in the chair across from him, which was exactly what he expected her to do, because Emily was the kind of person who processed events by entering them directly rather than orbiting them. She folded her hands on the table. She looked at him. "What happens now?" she asked. "Reeves, the detective, he'll want to talk to your mother tomorrow, not tonight. Tonight, she rests." Jack set his cup down. "There'll be some process over the next few weeks. Statements, probably some legal things. But your mother comes through all of that, and you come through it, and on the other side of it, things start to look different." "Different how?" "Safer," he said. "Voss and the people above him, they're going to be occupied for a very long time with things that have nothing to do with your family." Emily considered this. "And the other women? The ones from the building?" "All of them," Jack said. "The other facilities too. Reeves and his people are moving on them tonight." Something moved in Emily's face. Relief, but the particular kind that comes with guilt attached. The guilt of someone who hadn't known there were others, and now did. "We didn't know," she said quietly. "We just wanted our mom. We didn't know there were other people." "You ran through the rain and you asked for help," Jack said. "That's how you fixed it. You asking for help is what opened every single door that got opened tonight." Emily sat with that for a moment. Then she said with the careful tone of someone who had been holding a question for several hours and had finally decided to ask it, "What about our dad?" Jack had been expecting the question, had been expecting it since the diner, when Emma's voice had gone worn smooth talking about a man who said he'd fix it and didn't come back. "I don't know where your father is," Jack said, honestly, no softening. "But I know some people who are good at finding things out. If there's something to find, we'll find it. And if there isn't," he held her gaze, "then you'll know that too. And knowing is always better than not knowing, even when what you know is hard." Emily was quiet. Then she nodded, the same short, filing it away nod that he'd seen in the car. "Okay," she said. "Okay." Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway. She was holding her mother's hand, and her mother was just behind her. Sarah Carver, standing in Ruth's kitchen doorway, in borrowed clothes that were slightly too large, and with her hair still damp, and shadows under her eyes that 3 days of captivity had pressed deep. She was looking at Jack with an expression that he didn't quite know how to receive. The expression of someone who had been running a calculation in their head. Who is this person? Why did he do this? What does it cost? And had not yet arrived at a satisfying answer. She was also trying very hard not to cry and doing about 70% of a successful job of it. Emma tugged her forward into the kitchen, stopping in front of Jack's chair. Emma looked up at him with that same direct look she'd had in the cafe, in the car, across every hour of this long night. "This is him," Emma said to her mother, simply, like a fact being confirmed. Sarah Carver looked at Jack. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Mr. Colton, Jack is fine. Jack," she took a breath, set her jaw in the way Emily set her jaw, which told Jack something fundamental about where Emily had learned to do it. There aren't words that are the right size for this. I've been trying to find them since Danny told me in the car." She stopped. "I have nothing that fits." "You don't need words," Jack said. "You need to sit down and drink something and sleep." He glanced at Ruth. Ruth was already moving toward the cupboard. "We can have the version of this conversation that has words in it later." Sarah looked at him for another moment. Then something in her posture, the last held tension, the final guard that had been standing watch across 3 days of being strong enough to get to the other side, came down. Not collapsing, just resting. The particular rest of someone who has finally, after a very long time, found a room where they don't need to hold everything up alone. She sat down. Emma climbed into the chair next to her immediately, pressed herself against her mother's arm, and closed her eyes. The movement of a child who had been running on adrenaline for hours and had now that the thing she'd been running toward was real and present and right there, finally allowed her body to do what her body had been trying to do since before the rain. Emily stayed where she was, at the table across from Jack, hands folded, eyes open, still very much present and processing. But her shoulders had dropped 3 full inches. He could see it clearly. Ruth set hot tea in front of Sarah. Marcus and Danny had moved toward the back of the kitchen with the quiet tact of men who understood when a room needed less of them in it. Ruth refilled Jack's coffee and said, in a tone that did not invite discussion, "You're staying until that side is no longer my concern." "Ruth!" "Not a debate," she said, and went to stand near the window, which was Ruth's version of giving people space while still keeping an eye on them. The kitchen was quiet. Jack looked at the 3 of them. Emma, asleep against her mother's arm, Emily watching the table, Sarah with both hands around the teacup and her eyes closed and her breathing, finally, visibly, beginning to slow. The ordinary, extraordinary sight of people who had been through something terrible and had made it to the other side of it, and were now simply sitting in a warm kitchen, drinking tea at 1 in the morning, which was the least dramatic and most profound thing possible. His phone was on the table. He turned it face down. He thought about Reeves's voice saying 63. He thought about Voss's hands flat on a desk and a daughter who thought her father was in logistics. He thought about 11 women moving toward a north loading door and the particular quality of the sound when people who have stopped expecting the door to open find that it has. He thought about Emma's fingers on his sleeve. He picked up his coffee and he drank it, and he sat in Ruth Calder's kitchen on a Thursday that had gone far beyond its original intentions, and he was present for it, completely, without the part of his mind that was always already leaving, always already calculating the next thing. He was just here, in this room, with these people. At some point, Emily looked up at him across the table. "She told me to trust you," Emily said quietly. "Emma, when we were still outside the cafe, before we went in." She paused. "I said we didn't know who you were. She said it didn't matter, that she could tell." Emily held his gaze. "She said you looked like someone who understood what it felt like to need help and not have anyone show up." Jack was quiet for a moment. "She's not wrong," he said. Emily nodded slowly. Then she unfolded her hands, picked up the tea Ruth had set in front of her at some point, and drank it. And for the first time since the cafe, since the rain, since 2 little girls had come through a door with everything they had and put it into the hands of a stranger, she looked, just slightly, like a child. The night had cost what nights like that cost. Jack knew the accounting would come later. The questions, the complications, the long reach of consequences that a man in his position could never fully predict. There were things ahead that would be difficult. There were things about his own life and choices, and the distance between who he was and who he might have been, that this night had pulled into sharper focus than he was entirely comfortable with. But right now, in this kitchen, at this table, three people who had run out of options had found their way back to each other. Two of them had trusted a stranger in the rain, and the stranger had shown up. That was the whole of it. That was enough. Jack Colton drank his coffee, and the night held still around him. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, it asked nothing more from him than to simply be where he was.